It's Tuesday, April the 2nd, 2013. Hello, friends. I'm Matthew T.G.
Hello, friends. I'm Heath Mulligan.
Hey, and I'm Tony Casey. Welcome to the Techology Show, friends. This is a weekly podcast featuring technology, theology, and everything in between. This is episode 197. So this whole friend thing, this is nice the way you've started this out now, Teej. Yeah.
Well, we're episode.
Look, you were expecting it this morning. That's what I love. The first couple of weeks, it caught you by surprise.
Yes.
This week, you guys knew it was coming, and
He's
I loved
excited.
I actually didn't know it was coming.
Oh,
so
really?
it
Right,
caught
yeah.
me again.
Okay.
And then Heath piled on there.
I did my best Joel Osteen.
Sounded like
impersonation.
Mr. Rogers to me.
Oh, man.
No.
Whoa,
I can't
Heath,
do
something's changed in your camera, so I'm going to be working on that. Very
Ooh.
stuff. You are very bright and vivid today.
I like that.
I'm
Yes.
bright and vivid.
All right, so the big talk out of the basketball tournament was the player for Louisville, Ware, and
Kevin Ware, yep.
yeah, tragic injury. You can just just hope the best for him and
Yeah,
quick recovery.
The word is it was a terrible injury. He had very successful surgery,
Yeah.
and is even was going to be released from the hospital, and was actually talking about just going to practice today to see his
See
teammates.
everyone,
Yeah, it
And,
wasn't as bad an injury as it could have been, my understanding.
Right,
because,
yes.
it could have really messed up some muscles and
Right.
ligaments and
Yeah,
stuff. but
yeah.
Still intense. I mean, let's not.
Very intense injury. We're all squirming, thinking about it. I had gone without. Yes, thoughts and prayers out to this young man,
Yeah.
and a quick recovery. Everything that I have heard so far from Rick Pitino and read online is that he will be able to. It's not a career-ending injury. He will
Okay.
be able to play again. If they've whatever they did to his leg.
Everything heals properly.
If it heals
sure.
properly, that's
Yeah.
the word. Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, well,
your
you're
vocabulary is
So
so
real
much
quick,
better.
a Final Four. Do you have a favorite here? I think in your bracket, or did you didn't fill out a bracket?
I did not fill out a
I
bracket.
didn't fill out a bracket.
I am
None of us
pulling
did.
I am pulling for Wichita State
Yeah.
simply because not because they're underdog. Greg Marshall is from South Carolina. Their coach. He coached at Winthrop, and I just think that'd be cool to see Wichita State.
So as a South Carolina, I lean towards South Carolina. I have wanted South Carolina to get him as their basketball coach.
Yes,
And
amen.
I don't.
Or
I don't know-
Clemson.
And I don't. Yeah, there you go, man. There you go. All right. Well, listen. Let's talk about what's on the docket for today. We pre-recorded an interview with Dan Ryland. He's the executive pastor down at 12 Stone. If you will, Heath, hold up the book there. We interviewed him about his book, Amplified Leadership. Those of you that are in the Wesleyan Church, ordained ministers, actually got a copy. The denomination bought everyone a copy of that book. It was a delightful time. You're going to see that in a moment.
Yes.
And then coming out of that interview, we want to talk to Dr. David Riggs. I found out just through a couple of news agencies that the Sacra Pagina exhibit was going on at Indiana Wesleyan University. You might think, well, what in the world's that? We're going to save that. We'll let Dr. Riggs tell you what that is. So we're going to do that on the heels of our interview with Dan Ryland. So here we are now. Without further ado, Dan Ryland. Dan Ryland is executive pastor of 12 Stone Church in Lawrenceville, Georgia, listed in Outreach Magazine as the #1 fastest growing church in America in 2010. He's worked closely with John Maxwell for 20 years, first as an executive pastor at Skyline Wesleyan Church in San Diego, then as vice president of leadership and church development at Enjoy. His semi-monthly e-newsletter, The Pastor Coach, is distributed to over 40,000 subscribers. Dan has been married to his beautiful bride, Patty, for over 30 years, and together they have 2 children, a daughter, Mackenzie, and a son, John Peter. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Listen, we've got you on today to talk about your book, Amplified Leadership, and let's just start by having you explain first what you mean when you use the term amplified leadership.
Sure. Well, first of all, it doesn't mean it's a loud book. It's not about electric guitars and amps, even though I love guitars, my passion. Really, it just means amplified simply means to expand or enlarge or increase your leadership by developing other leaders. So that's really the bottom line, to expand or increase.
Sure.
Yeah.
The subtitle of your book is Five Practices to Establish Influence, Build People, and Impact Others for a Lifetime. So we just want to run through, in these questions, run through those five practices. The first one is establish relationship. Now, that's a lot more than just a meet and greet, correct?
Absolutely. That's really involved. I mean, the skills build on each other. They get higher and more complicated as they go. But this one is probably more involved than people would even think. It deals with everything from self-awareness to learning to be real, so you can to learn to be real, which is a huge challenge for a lot of pastors. Here's what I think: people like you best when you're yourself, but not everybody will like you. Right. But so you have to learn how to be who you are, and people will like you best when you are yourself, when you're the real you. And so this really, a lot of pastors try to hide. A lot of times there's a lot of pressures, and the book begins to walk you through how you really live out the true you, and not hide, be real, live authentic, connect. Because when you connect with people, they'll trust you. When they trust you, they'll follow you.
Dan, put you on the spot here a little bit. I was at a pastor's gathering in January, and this very topic of authenticity came up. And pretty much the consensus, there were 40 pastors in this group, and the consensus among us was, while we believed in authenticity, that oftentimes the church is the one place where we avoid that. And especially, within pastoral circles, you get to a pastor's conference and you begin to describe yourself in terms of your church and what's happening at that ministry. I'm just curious your own thoughts there. Why do you think authenticity is such a challenge?
I think authenticity is a challenge in the local church because the local church is one of the only places, if not the only place, that you get fired for telling the truth.
Oh, wow.
And I that's long weight on my heart. And we try to encourage environments, board environments, where a guy can come in, a pastor can come in and talk to the board and be real and be honest about a struggle, and they'll embrace that struggle, not lower the standards of leadership, but embrace the struggle so that somebody can rise up and lead like God has intended, rather than being fearful, having to hide, because if you tell the truth, you're gone.
Yeah, that's very good. Listen, the second practice you talk about in your book is engage a follower. Now, what's the main focus of this practice?
I think the big idea there is that at some point, well, first of all, the church is about relationships and redemption, and we get that. And we're good at that part. But the truth is, it's also about results. So you've got to put all three of those together:
Yeah.
relationships, redemption, and results. So what that means is at some point we have to move from having a cup of coffee at Starbucks to actually life change, actually getting something done. And for that to happen, I think a leader has to be comfortable to acknowledge that he really does want people to say yes and follow. And the way to relax in that, I think, is remembering it's not about you, it's about the church's mission. And let me share something that I think is pretty key here.
Okay.
I think that your influence as a leader is either increasing or decreasing at all times. It never remains the same. And I think when leaders wrestle that out, that followership, they grasp that followership thing better, that in the local church it's either increasing or decreasing. It feels like sometimes it's staying neutral because the church moves slowly because it's relationship based. But it's either increasing or decreasing, and we got to pay attention to that.
One of the things you talk about in engaging a follower is you talk about inspiring people to follow the vision. And one of the things I got a lot out of the book that we use in our staff meetings now is kind of this helping people have this level of confidence. And one of the questions is, are you utterly dependent upon God? Do you think that in this thing of leadership, sometimes we leave that out too often?
Oh, yeah. I think sometimes, I believe that all leaders have some insecurity. It might be just a little bit of insecurity. It might be a lot of insecurity. But depending on how insecure you are, you're driven for results. You're driven to make things happen. And the more you're driven to make things happen, or more desperate, sometimes leaders get very desperate, then we're very tempted to leave God out of the picture and do it ourselves. And intellectually, we all know that doesn't work.
Right.
But emotionally, we try to do it anyway.
Yeah. Another part in this section that I appreciated, you took some time out. Let me just say to our listeners, there are so many great anecdotal things that you have in here where you weave good stories in, but also some great advice. So in this section, you talk about gratitude, and there were 3 things that you highlighted. You say, first, stop comparing. And second, be careful about buying into the cultural lie that you deserve more. God didn't promise you more. He promised to take care of your needs. And third, make a daily practice of thanking God for your friends and family, gifts and abilities, church and possessions. I tell you, it sometimes in ministry you can become so overwhelmed that this very thing of being a grateful person, it seeps right out of your life.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I just think your observations there, my guess is that this is not only something that perhaps you have come to in your own life, but you've seen this in ministry as well across the board.
I've seen it in ministry, and I think there's a correlation and a connection between generosity and gratitude. They interact and play with each other. And so when gratitude begins to wane, it's difficult to also be generous. And when a leader stops being generous, it's very difficult to lead with a full heart.
Yeah, wow, good stuff.
The third practice is embrace a team member. And you start off this section of the book by giving a shout out to Patrick Lencioni in his book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which is a must read for every pastor, I think. Yeah. Tell us why you like that book, and then talk about a little bit about how to embrace a team member, what that means.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I agree with you. I think it's one of I personally think it's the best teamwork book ever written that I've read.
Wow.
It's simple. I've read dozens. That might be exaggerated. I've read probably 12 to 15 books on teamwork.
Wow.
And this is the best. I love the way he just gets to the meat of the matter.
Right. Yeah.
And says it the way it is, and it's just a very helpful thing. So I didn't want to try to improve on it because I can't. Yeah. But embracing a team member, the 2 skills that works with is invite and equip. And a couple of things that are important there. I was traveling with some young 20-somethings, and they were telling me that, the R word, you can't use the R word anymore, recruiting. And so I used the better, nicer, cooler, warmer word, of invite. And I agree, it's a better word.
Yeah.
But the truth is, the reason I like recruit is because invite is soft. It has no back end to it. Recruit says, let's get something done. And honestly, guys, make no mistake, Jesus was a master recruiter.
Right.
When he said, come and follow me, he wasn't saying like, whatever, if you feel like it. He was saying, no, he wants you to say yes.
Yeah.
And so it involves the recruiting, the inviting, and then equipping. And I think here's the second thing that's really helpful to say or to share is that there's a real difference between equipping and developing. To equip, you're training people for specific ministry tasks. To develop, you're pouring into people to make them bigger, better, stronger people. Equipping's on the church's agenda, and developing's on the person's agenda.
Yeah. Wow. In this section, I felt like for people who are pastoring small churches, you kind of give them permission to do some things. Let me just read a section here. You say, if you're leading a small church and have a limited number of people to work with, there are 2 things you can do. First, reduce the number of ministries you offer in your church. And second, invest more time in people who are attending but not yet serving. How often have you witnessed this thing of small churches just doing too much, too many ministries going on?
Almost. Consistently, if not near constantly.
Yeah.
I just got to be part of teaching a seminary course as kind of an adjunct thing going on. And there was one, let me see if I can get you the numbers right. There was there was about 112 people, 115 people in the church, and they had listed 54 ministries.
Good
Wow.
gravy.
Well, that's like 2 people per. I mean, how do you keep you? That's exhausting.
Right.
And so I have found over the years, not empirical research, but field level, just observation, that the smaller the church, the more stuff they try to do. And I near beg people to say, please lean it out, lean it out, lean it out. Hey, you guys, you probably know the book, but Simple Church.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a great book. If you're coaching somebody and they're not kind of getting on this idea, that's a great book to start them with.
Yeah. One of the things that I want you to get into the fourth practice here, apprenticed. But before we do, I would just say this to our listeners: your book is very people intensive, as opposed to building a church. And I think, especially in this quote I just read, you see that where you're saying, listen, reduce the ministry, the things that you're doing, and take that time and now invest in other people and build them up. And, the point that you're making here, as I understand it, is you're going to get a much greater return on that.
Much greater.
Yeah, than trying to do 1 million ministries.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, talk to us about this fourth practice here, coach and apprentice.
Yeah, the coaching apprentice, we're talking about a couple of skill sets of select, picking, choosing, and including. Jesus obviously modeled that for us. He chose the 120, he chose the 70, he chose the 12, he chose Peter, James, and John. So we see a model, we see a biblical pattern for choosing, selecting. It's not random, it's not you all come. We love everybody, we invite everybody, we connect with everybody, but when you get down to choosing the apprentices and the leaders, you're actually making selections. And then you begin to include them, like Jesus. He walked with them, he spent time with them. We got to do the same thing. Where we lead with others, we begin to hand off the baton, we begin to train them and show them the way.
This final practice, you called it mentor a new leader. And let me ask you real quick before you get into that. Do you see, to me, as I've read your book, it's almost like an investment book. It's a book about how do you find the best investment, how do you know how much to invest, and how do you make that investment pay off in the long run. But just kind of talk about investing in others, but in the process of mentoring a new leader.
That's a really insightful question, because you can't mentor or develop anybody who doesn't want to be coached and mentored.
Yeah.
And sometimes we try to pour our lives into people who don't want it and aren't ready. And others, churches, especially smaller environments, will get frustrated because they feel like they don't have that ego. They don't have enough people. I think it's important to say that one new leader can change your church.
Yes.
Oftentimes we want 50 more and 100 more, but one true leader, one more will change your church. 2 more, it's like we need to have a party.
Yeah.
We gotta right size this thing, and because a leader is really different than somebody who is a helper, a volunteer. And so obviously between equipping and developing, there's a blend and blur, there's an overlap. But when you move into that mentoring a new leader, you're talking about, God, bring me 1, bring me 2, bring me 3.
That's good.
Because I know that'll change their church. And then you begin to invest and empower, handing over the keys. That's difficult for a lot of guys, for a lot of gals, is to actually hand over the keys and let them lead as you empower them. We want to take them back.
Yeah.
And but if they're going to step up and rise up so that you can do more, you've got to give the keys away. Here's what I believe. There's more than enough work for all of us. So relax and give it away.
Yeah, but for those of us in leadership, a lot of us are control freaks, man. I mean, we really are. And your word to us is a good word, and it's what we need to hear. But there's this personal struggle that goes on, because I think at the end of the day we say, well, it's on me. If something goes bad or if it doesn't go right, it's on me. But what you're saying is, with that kind of an approach, we limit our ministries.
We do. We limit our ministries. Yeah. And the people that you raise up, they might not do it perfectly, but sometimes there's a fine line between control and control, which is a good thing when you're being responsible, and controlling, which is not a good thing, and that drives people away.
And in the bigger picture on this thing, like that heart that says it's ultimately on me, doesn't that boil down to pride in some way? I mean, just throwing that out there. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that everything I'm reading says that for any organization or any church to grow, you have to make this move from high control and low accountability to low control and high accountability. And it seems to me that going through these practices from, starting that relationship to developing a new leader, that's what you're doing. You're saying, I don't need to control this, but I'm going to make sure that you are. I just think that I think in most churches it's high control, low accountability, and we need to flip-flop that.
Well, Heath, there's another observation that comes piggybacking what you're saying, and that is in my observation with churches, when there's high control, there's low training.
Oh yeah.
And high training, there's low control. Because when you don't train the people, you have to control them.
Wow.
But if you train them and develop them, you can set them free.
Yeah. Good.
Oh, that's good.
One of the things we wanted to be conscious of, Dan, is we wanted to at least have you on and to talk about these 5 practices, but there are so many things out of this book that I want to cherry pick. So we have a couple minutes here. I want to go back. You say this at one point in your book. This is in, I think, section 3. When I was younger, I hired for competence first. Now I hire for chemistry. Of course, competence matters, but typically there are many applicants who can do the job. Talk about this thing of chemistry a little bit. I mean, that statement got my attention.
For me, and maybe it's just, as I'm getting older as a leader, I hate to admit that, but, we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've just found that chemistry is everything. Choosing the people that you want to work with, I think, is a privilege and a responsibility. I've seen and watched over the years in many, many churches, people who are very, very gifted and really good at what they do, very competent, even high capacity. But when the chemistry's off, it just doesn't work. Best example is we can hire a student pastor, for example, from a church who's very successful, it works really well, comes here, and it just doesn't work. He's the same guy, sharp, capable, high capacity, but it doesn't work. And that almost always means the chemistry's off and the culture didn't fit.
Yeah. There's another place in your book, too. I thought all the way through this book, you are very open. Your life in ministry is an open book for people to read, and you talk about not only successful things and right choices you made, but wrong choices. And at one point in the book, you talk about like 2 people that you placed in ministry positions where you said initially that's not going to be a good fit, but because of pressure. And I so identified with you at that point, because there are times that you reluctantly put someone in a position and everything in you is saying that is not going to be a fit, but because other voices and people, you do it, and then you regret it in the end. What can we do to kind of step back in those moments and push through and go with our rock solid belief that this is not going to be a good decision?
I think a couple things. One is remember and act out, live out the fact that it's better to have an empty leadership position than have the wrong person in the position.
Yeah.
And second, go ahead and settle it in private before you lead it out in public. Sometimes the mistake I make is I'm, a lot of times leading the church is like in flight. And so I'm making decisions on the move, and I haven't thought it through because it's just too fast.
Yeah.
But if I'm in prayer and careful thought and journaling and thinking it out, get it settled, and then move into it with non-negotiation, so that it's like you and God, or you and a team, or you and the board, or whoever, you figured it out, then move in and go get it done, rather than, because if you don't, I find, at least for me, I love people, emotion will move me, I'll fall under pressure, and then I'll make a bad decision.
Yeah, that's so good. When I read this part of your book, I thought of something that I've discovered. I've been in district leadership for about 9 years now. And what I realized that in a lot of our churches, especially smaller churches, the idea is that something is better than nothing. And I have literally found out that there are times where nothing is better than something.
Yes.
Amen.
That's really true.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we let you go, where can our listeners find your book, and where can they find you on the internet?
Good. 2 questions. Thanks for asking me that. I think the simplest, fastest way to find the book is go to Amazon.com.
Good. All right.
And that's the simplest and fastest.
And we'll have an affiliate link there for you, so you can purchase the book, and we'll get a little kickback from that. So, yeah.
All right. And then I would love for them to come check out my blog at simply at danryland.com. And there's a lot of articles and my recommended book choices and just good fun stuff there. And so just, danryland.com.
Hey, we want to thank Dan. We all have this book
Yep.
because of a partnership between your church, 12 Stone, and our denomination. So thank you for
Yes,
making this book
absolutely.
available to all of
Welcome.
us.
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today.
Yeah. Well, blessings on you, and Lord just be with you all there at 12 Stone. It's just wonderful what God is doing and how the kingdom's being built there.
Hey, thank you, guys. Bless you.
All right.
All right,
Bye-bye.
thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So I'm just curious, Heath. I know you read that book.
Yeah.
What's your favorite part of that book? I mean, it's always hard for me because you have principles, and he's laying out principles all the way throughout the book. But then I always get hung up on anecdotal stories, which are so good and true
Right.
to ministry.
The thing I really like about it is it is like a step by step.
Yeah.
You could literally take this into your church, and it is a step by step process of how to choose,
Right.
select leaders.
Yeah.
It's the manual.
The manual.
There's the Bible and then applied
No,
leadership.
the discipline, and then let's get our priorities right here, Heath. What in the world?
All right. Well,
Oh,
listen,
my goodness.
I was going around to a few news sites, and about 2 weeks ago, found out that the Sacra Pagina exhibit was going to be at Indiana Wesleyan University. So did some talking and sent some emails, and finally got in contact with someone there. And so we're going to talk with Dr. David Riggs right now. He's the executive director of Indiana Wesleyan University's John Wesley Honors College. David, thank you for taking time out to be with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So the reason we asked you here is to talk about this exhibit. Let's begin by you just telling our listeners, what the exhibit is and why it matters.
Yeah, well, the story starts sort of back in 2009 or so when Steve Green, the president of Hobby Lobby, the national arts and crafts store, began to put into implementation a desire to begin to collect biblical manuscripts. And that quickly grew into a rather significant collection that's now referred to as the Green Collection. That collection has now reached a point that it's over 40,000 manuscripts and artifacts in the collection, which make it, if not the largest, certainly one of the largest private collections in the world. But what makes it particularly significant is the desire that the Greens have to make these texts and these artifacts available for people to be able to see, to view, to learn more about. And so they've put together large exhibits that it's called passages. First at Oklahoma City, which is where the Greens are from. In Charlotte, Atlanta, they had a major exhibit from the Green Collection in Rome in coordination with the Vatican. And so that's provided venues for them to be able to make these items available to the larger public.
Yeah.
All with an eye towards eventually starting a National Bible Museum, which is now scheduled to be established in Washington, D.C. By 2016. So on the one hand, these exhibits, and part of that has been a smaller traveling exhibit of about 40 to 50 items that they've been taking around to different Christian colleges and universities. Partly, again, to continue to bring these items to the broader public,
Sure.
but also to highlight the other aspect of what they're doing, which is what's called the Green Scholars Initiative, which is essentially, it's an international scholarly collaboration where they've been able to involve scholars from over 30 colleges and universities in ways that allow them to let's put it this way. You have items here that are so rare and significant that they're able to attract a number of scholars who are at the top of their fields from a variety of different religious traditions and denominational backgrounds. But then they're connected with faculty members at Christian colleges and universities. And then from there with undergraduates to be able to get them involved. And so it's one of those efforts to get not just first-rate scholarship on the items in the collection, but also to be able to give undergraduates at Christian colleges and universities a chance to be involved in that sort of research.
Now, what's your connection with the Green Scholars Initiative then? Are you just like a go-between to get students access to that?
Yeah, well, actually, the major way that many of us at Indiana Wesleyan are involved is because Jerry Pattengale, who's our assistant provost for scholarship here, is also the executive director of the Green Scholars Initiative, and the one that's really been the force behind bringing all of these different scholars together. And so he's given several of us opportunities to be able to be involved in the research. The collection we have here at Indiana Wesleyan right now, I had the opportunity to transcribe and translate an original letter from Martin Luther that has not been published before, and that the Greens were able to purchase a couple of years ago. And then also have had the opportunity more recently to be appointed what they call a distinguished scholar for Latin texts, which means that I have the privilege of being able to go, and the collection's housed in Oklahoma City right now, but to be able to go there and search through the different Latin texts and see what sort of things I might like to do research on.
Wow,
that's nice, cool, man.
Well, there's a lot of chatter in our chat room how impressive your bookshelf is. We do a lot of interviews, people in their offices, and yours is.
It's up to par with
absolutely.
with the likes of
Batterson.
Yeah, so you're doing good.
So such a nationwide deal. How did IWU get on the schedule, and how long is the exhibit going to be at IWU?
Yeah, the exhibit starts today and it goes through Thursday. And really, in terms of the involvement, it's really twofold. One, as I said, is Jerry Pattengale's involvement.
Yeah.
And Jerry Pattengale is somebody who he's increasingly involved in so many things around the world. But one of the beauties of it for us at Indiana Wesleyan and the Wesleyan Church more generally is his desire to always connect those things that he's doing to the Wesleyan Church and to Indiana Wesleyan. And so it's, like I said, it's provided a lot of opportunities here for us to be involved. But then also the Greens, the Green family has a major connection to the university here. And it's hard to find a family, I think, that's been more generous as Christian philanthropists in recent years. And they've certainly been very good to Indiana Wesleyan. And later this week, they have the Society of World Changers, where David Green, the CEO of Hobby Lobby, will be inducted into that society.
Oh, cool.
One question here, and this is just for you personally. I know this would just be your opinion, but from a scholastic point of view, what do you think the impact of the Green Scholars Initiative is having right now, but can have in the future?
I think the impact it's having right now is the way that it's giving. When you decide that your academic vocation is going to lead you to a Christian college or university, you understand that that decision means that teaching is going to be at the center of what you do.
Yeah. And
the chances that you'll have to be engaged in research will have to work around that. And in the past, that's meant that oftentimes it's not been easy to be involved as Christian scholars. And I think one of the things that this Green Scholars Initiative does is it helps connect faculty members and their students to, significant texts to do research on, but to be able to do it in the context of the teaching that we're called to do. And so in that sense, it allows us to do the kinds of things that you would do at a research university, but to do it within the context of that Christian collegiate context of teaching. And so I think that right now that's already a major impact that it's having. And the students that are involved in those things will be that next generation of biblical scholars and Christian historians. Long term, I think the real, when I've looked at this exhibit, a little over a year ago, I was the resident scholar when this exhibit was at Union University in Tennessee. And as I was looking around the room at the exhibit, where it starts, with cuneiform artifacts, from the 25th century BC, and then begins to work its way all the way up to the 20th century. As you're looking and sort of scanning through this, you're realizing what a rich history there is in terms of the Bible being handed down from one generation to the next, a rich history of interpretation. And in looking around at all of the different texts, whether it's the Greek papyrus texts or these massive Hebrew scrolls or the English Bibles, as you look around at all these different texts, you're also reminded that each of these texts represent a Christian community that through the centuries has just like us, been reading these scriptures, seeking to understand how to live out the narratives of those texts in their lives. And so I think long term, the biggest impact it'll have is the way it'll be able to communicate the influence that the Bible has had over time on cultures and societies, but also I think for us as Christians to be able to see that when we pick up the Bible, for many of us today on our iPhone, that we're the descendants of a rich lineage of scriptural texts being handed down from one generation to the next, because many of these biblical manuscripts that we have only survived because they've been recycled in one way or another. In other words, no Bible has just been handed down from beginning to end. It's had to be copied over again and again and again, and then translated into different languages. And so I think being able to communicate how the history of the Bible is one that's not just interesting, but again, for us as Christians, one that should be humbling for us. Yeah. That when we read scripture in our devotions or whatever it might be, that a lot's gone into that surviving and being handed down to us today.
One of the alleged criticisms of the postmodern generation and its influence on the church is this idea that we're a community of people with centuries of history, but oftentimes we act like the church was discovered about 20 years ago. And so, this project, everything you just said is a great reminder of just the rich history that we have, and you can visually see it on exhibit. That's what it sounds like to me anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us. And we would love to just kind of keep our fingers on the pulse of this, and maybe in the future, perhaps have you back and someone else. And especially as this, the Green Scholars Initiative continues. And it's clear to me as I was just reading, I hadn't even heard of this till 2 weeks ago. And I thought to myself, my word, the impact of this, the potential is huge for scholarship and for the kingdom, and so we appreciate it.
Are there, a lot of our listeners are, scattered around the country. We're here in the South. Where is there like a tour page for the exhibit where people can go and see maybe where it's going to be and maybe go check it out?
Yeah, if I don't know the exact website, but if you Googled Passages exhibit, it'll pull up the website. Because like, as I said, Passages is the name of the big exhibit that's been at places like the Oklahoma City Museum of Art. But you also could get information there about any times the exhibit is going to be coming, the smaller exhibit, the Sacra Pagina, coming to colleges and universities.
I think even inside of Hobby Lobby, I think my wife loves that place, let me tell you, so I've been a few times. And as you go in, oftentimes there's like this kiosk thing set up that's got some brochures in it. I think, if my memory serves me right, they're listed, that tour date schedule is listed on those things that they have there. So
yeah, and I was just checking. You can go to explorepassages.com. That's the website.
There you go.
All right. Thanks. Well, David, again, thanks so much for being with us today.
No, I appreciate it. I enjoyed it.
All right.
Hey, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if you've heard of it, Heath. So this is always dangerous because I'm kind of half talking about something I half know about.
Right.
Which means it's a quarter.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
We don't know.
Reduced down to 25%. part of this initiative, there's a museum over in Charlotte, which is part of this whole thing here.
Yeah.
Southern Wesleyan University, the alumni department actually sent something out.
Yes.
And you could go over. Now
we were banned from that.
Well, you know what I'm wondering? I'm wondering now is there a museum over there, or was there a museum where this particular exhibit was coming? And I'm beginning to think maybe that's what it was.
Okay, let me passages may.
Listen, people are not tuning in.
Well, listen, the exhibit in Charlotte. It was in Charlotte. It was in Atlanta last year. It went from Atlanta to the Vatican. Went from the Vatican to Oklahoma City. It's been in Charlotte. It just ended this weekend in Charlotte. Now it's in Indiana Wesleyan. So that's what. So
that was it. That was where the alumni went. Well, again, if it comes in your area, take time out to see it. I did not, and have huge regrets.
Deep regret. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
absolutely.
I just didn't understand. And in the rush of a schedule, you get an email and you filter. You learn to filter stuff out quick, and sometimes you just miss stuff. So we appreciate Dr. Ridge taking time out to be with us and explain that. All right, let's move on to
Download of the Week.
Yay! So our download of the week is Tempo. And if you're on Android and you use Google Now,
should really speed up that transition. Okay, go ahead.
This is this is for iPhone, and it's only on the iPhone.
Yes.
Again, it works like Google Now. So those of us in the iOS department, we don't have this.
Yeah.
All right, so let me just demonstrate it for you.
Yes.
So here it is. You tap on it, and what this does, so you see some things coming up for me on my schedule. What Tempo does is it goes into your contacts, it goes into your email, it goes into your calendar, and it aggregates all of these. So, for instance,
aggravates?
No,
yes.
Aggregates.
So I get like 70 text messages. It's so aggravating.
So right here on Thursday, you have worship team practice, and you need to be very detailed. I use Google Calendar. So in that, I have my praise team that's set up every week. It repeats. And every person that's a part of that who has texting and things of that nature, I've put in as members of this meeting. So you can see that there are 4 names right there. If I needed to send a message, I could just tap this, and I can include everyone, or I can pick out individual people who are part of that. If I was running late, I could tap this right here, and again, let everyone know, or specific people know, that I'm going to be late.
Yeah.
Also, you can see right here it has the address, which links up with Google Maps.
Yeah.
And so now I can, come over here, I can tap on this, and now I can route to...
Now, I'm curious, does this link with Google Maps automatically, or is that because of the jailbreak tweak that we put into your phone?
It asks you.
Okay.
It
All
asks
right,
you
there
which
go.
one you want.
Yeah,
so I
it
say
says,
Google Maps.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think the default, I think I had to tell it that I prefer Google Maps.
And so, I started using this about a week ago. If you download the app, there's going to be a waiting list. So how long did it take you, Heath?
I think I signed up for it last week, and I was like number 5-something thousand. And I think I accidentally signed up for it twice because I got my first notification and went to it, and it's like, oh, you're number 300 in line. I'm like, oh. But like 2 hours later, I got it, and I'm in. I'm in the club. Members only.
Way to go. So my advice
That's
on
right.
this, you already heard me say it, the more detailed you can get, I use Google Calendar, the more detailed you can get on that. And also, it aggregates your emails. So what will happen is, let me go back here and show you, like I have... let's see here. Forgive me.
You're a busy man.
Leadership team meeting, and so that's with Tim Jones, Buddy Rampy. And what it will do is you can notice down here at the bottom it has emails. It's going to grab some of the latest emails that Buddy was included in on, or Tim Jones, to say, hey, is there any information that's related to this particular meeting, and you need to pull up that email as well. So initially, very impressed with this. I love the way it works, and it's one, but it is an app that I'm disciplining myself to go to, and we'll just see how it goes long term.
You told me that as you were getting started on this, there wasn't a lot of help tutorial-wise from them. What did you do to really get some real lessons in how to
it went to YouTube and typed in Tempo calendar app reviews, and so I think All Things D had a really good review that showed up on YouTube, and Gadget had a really good review that showed up on.
And they demonstrated like how to work
did.
through some of this stuff.
And
Very
what-
helpful.
Yeah, and one of the things with, and Tony may have expressed this, but they want you to, within Tempo, if you change your calendar within it, it'll upload everything. It'll change your calendar everywhere. So it's not saying that you got to go on Gmail and do all Google Calendar. You do it all within Tempo.
Yeah, it's all synchronized.
I do it on Google Calendar, so that's a personal thing. I like to use that as my central spot because it's easier for me to get all the information in there. I'm just familiar with it, but then it filters down to the Tempo. I mean, within a few seconds, boom!
Yeah.
Because everything's connected.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now my last question on this is, where can I go to get that huge iPhone that you have there, Tony?
Well,
I mean, that's like a television. That's a 60-inch.
I'm not saying that's the 5S. I'm not saying that.
That thing's bigger than your head, man. There's been a lot of criticism about
Let me see
Apple and
here.
the screen size. So,
How
yeah,
let me
can you
see.
take
How
the
can-
call? Hold your head up to the earpiece, please. All right, sorry.
Hello.
Okay. All right. That was
All
fun.
right. Let's move on to not download, but they said it.
Oh no, that's Rob Bell. Let's not move on to that.
Read my lips.
I'm going to say this again.
I've never taken steroids or HGH.
I took the initiative in creating the internet.
The Macintosh, of all the machines I've ever seen, is the only one that meets that standard.
I'm not a crook.
If you know what you're doing here, slide out.
If next year's phones can again double their performance, scoring around 6,300 on Geekbench, they'd be comparable to MacBook Pros released in 2012. That would put the fastest phone at just 2 years behind high-end laptops. Then, if smartphones can again double their speed to hit 12,600 on Geekbench, they'd be just as fast as today's best MacBook, the 15-inch high-resolution Retina model. Farhad Manjoo, in his article, The Great Smartphone Conundrum, source Slate.
Divorce is hardly an exception anymore. In fact, with the rate of marriage steadily dipping over the past decade and the divorce rate holding steady, you're likely to know more previously married couples than those who are legally bound. Accompanying this trend are multiple studies analyzing the effects that divorce has on children, and the results aren't good. Lauren Hansen reporting on the 9 negative effects divorce reportedly has on children. Source, The Week.
The future is coming faster than ever, with the tectonic plates of society, church, culture, technology, economy, and environment shifting beneath us. If you want to keep up with any of it and get new footing, you have to be fast. But here's the thing, the church often isn't. It has gained a reputation for reacting, copying, and generally riding the second wave of original movements reverberating through culture. Rick Warren, who is being quoted in an article entitled 10 Challenges Facing Us in the Next Decade. Source, Relevant Magazine.
Okay, our time's a little short in this segment today. These last 2 articles are great articles. First,
Yes.
let me talk about the one where that Lauren Hansen writes. Lauren Hansen is an op-ed writer, does editorials for The Week, and so what she's done is this. She's simply taken advantage of research that's been done over the last decade, and so she grabbed 9 studies, all of which talk about what seem to be a negative effects on children, and some of the stuff that she points out here is significant. I'm trying to find one here.
Smoking habits?
Yeah, 48% higher. For
men,
for women it was 39% higher. And so in this particular study, they talk about statistically significant difference, and this was one of those. And she has 8 other things in here that are very interesting.
And she's not just taking one study. She has taken multiple studies, multiple research. And this is not from, correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, this is not from a Christian perspective.
Not at all.
This is
Not
purely health and societal, related. And I'm telling you, all 9 of these are bad. The last one is early death.
Yeah. And they followed a group from the 1920, followed them their whole life. So this was an ongoing research study. Also, with number 3, it was poor math and social skills.
Yeah.
And what was really disheartening about this is the researcher on this, whose last name is Kim, says, quote, "It is unlikely that children of divorce will be able to catch up with their peers who live in more stable families."
Yeah. You would, if you just were in a bubble looking at this, you would have to ask yourself, what is having a greater effect on our culture than divorce? Because, like I said, more susceptible to illness, smoking, increased likelihood of committing crime, dropping out of school. I mean, all of these negative things that set out shockwaves. More likely to get divorced. I mean, this is just an amazing study.
So here's some pushback, Heath. So one of the pushback, if you read this article, like some researchers will say, well, there's been such a stigma towards divorce that some of these are social effects from that, and as divorce gets more accepted, then you'll see, some of these things, these trends go away because it's the stigma that's causing all the problem, and so there just needs to be no stigma about it. I mean, I'm just saying that's some of the pushback that you see here in this article.
Yeah, and that leads me. I don't know if you're ready to move on. The
sure,
quote we got from Rick Warren, 10 challenges. The reason I bring this up, the number 3rd challenge that the church is facing is that we'll need to reclaim the broken institution of marriage. And I'm telling you, as a pastor, I'm probably going to print off this 9 negative effects of divorce, and I'm going to say, as a church in our community, what are we doing to help people build healthy marriages? Because what we find in most local churches, what I find in my church, is the church is called to clean up messes. We are called, in so much time, our ministry is a reaction to what's going on. So how can we be proactive to help people, communicate within their marriage, raise healthy children? Just, man, so much.
This article, 10 Challenges Facing Us in the Next Decade, I mean, it's from Relevant magazine. Yeah. But the point is this, that culturally, the church hasn't been relevant.
No.
And I am hearing increasingly more and more that, especially in the 60s, there was kind of a jumping of the tracks where we just were no longer relevant within the society. And so this article is just talking about the 10 things that we're going to have to face. Some of these are going to be controversial, I'll tell you right now, especially given people's political leanings. And actually, one of the 10 is that we've got to stop tying ourselves to political groups. Somehow we have to forge this third way where we're not Democrat, we're not Republican, we're believers and building the kingdom of God.
And some of us may end up voting Democrats, or some of us may end up voting for a Republican.
but that's
on the basis of kingdom perspective, not on the basis.
Yes, on a political. Right. Yes.
Yeah, that's one thing I did appreciate about the 10 Challenges article, is that it does take, on political issues, it takes a kingdom point of view rather than a political point of view. I mean, one of the things, the last one is pro-life movement 2.0, and how pro-life has got to be more than just abortion and things like that.
Well, we talked in the pre-show. Some people are going to be challenged by that one, so I'm just warning you right now. Under number 6, number 6 was, we'll need to push beyond conventional categories to engage the rise of the, quote, nons. I want to read just a clip here, and this is from Shane Hips. Put simply, evangelicals will increasingly have answers to questions no one is asking. The failure to face this challenge will firmly secure this kind of Christianity in the margins of history and society. To avoid this, we must learn to embrace what Dietrich Bonhoeffer called religionless Christianity. These people will press beyond the tired religious categories of liberal and conservative. They will see the life and teachings of Jesus not as religious or even spiritual in nature, but rather as fundamentally human. And now, again, we throw opinions out here, and I don't know if I endorse that comment or not.
Right.
It just gives you It shows you how controversial this article can be.
Yeah.
Because I think tags like liberal and conservative do mean something.
Yes.
And so I'm not quite sure. But again, great article, worth the reading.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Very good. Very challenging article for sure.
So, Tony, how fast is your phone?
My phone is like incredibly fast.
It's not as fast as your next phone's going to be.
Well, and in this article, this one, the great smartphone conundrum, there are two phones out there right now that are above this. That is the new Galaxy phone and the HTC One.
Yeah.
Here's what I thought was interesting about this article. It talks about how it was the smartphone, or Apple, the iPhone, which really started this thing of exponentially ramping up the speed of these, and they're mini computers. And so two things hit me. Number one, the next bottleneck is battery.
Yeah.
So they've been able to make components small enough they can get the speed of these things up to high-end laptop computers. But now, how are they going to get the power?
So I've got a couple of thoughts on that. Either a really small-scale nuclear reactor.
Oh, the arc reactor.
Yeah, inside the phone itself. Or figure out a way to put a hamster wheel on the back, and you go with that. Okay, John, sorry, just thinking outside the box.
I don't think it's going to work. I'm just saying.
I have been having my iPhone 5 for the last 2 weeks. Battery life on it has just been
bad,
non-existent. So I actually downloaded an app called Battery Sense from Philips, and you can go through and it tells you, well, if you're just using the internet, if you're just talking, how much time you've got, and it tells you what settings you can change on your phone
to optimize
the battery. So I realized, I was like, oh, I didn't realize that I had that on all the time. So
we're in the day of the computers. Back when I was a child, there just hit this point where once you were getting into the Pentium 386s and stuff like that, where you'd buy a computer and you felt like 6 months later it was out of date and obsolete. And you remember the day that once we started having like a Core 2 Duo processors, we're kind of getting to this point where you don't feel like you're lagging behind 6 months. Like my last laptop I used faithfully for 6 years.
Yeah,
and that was just a huge thing, and it'll be that way for this. Now, there's some of this, like as you try to relate and say, okay, so our phones are as fast as our laptops. They are highly optimized. They're not the same thing. So, for example, we were talking pre-show about this little device called a Raspberry Pi. A Raspberry Pi is a miniature computer, costs $35, has a processor on it that's the speed that would run a comparable speed as a Pentium 3 processor. That's great. This Raspberry Pi can stream high-definition video, can do all kinds of stuff. If you hooked up a Pentium 3 processor, put an operating system on it, and tried to do anything with HD video or anything like that, it's going to grind to a halt. It's probably not going to be capable of even attempting to open the thing to do the other thing. They're highly optimized. I mean, what we've got in our phones is a completely different architecture than what you've got in your laptop. It's a completely different thing. And when you talk about optimization, one thing I love is that we're saying, oh yeah, the HTC One and the Samsung Galaxy 4, they're quad-core processors and they're finally scaling it. This is still a dual-core processor that was so highly designed and optimized that, like, to beat it, to even slightly get a better benchmark out of it, everybody else is really having to try to throw other stuff in there. I mean, so
in some tests it beat quad core processors.
Yeah, it did early on.
Because it was optimized.
Yeah, early on. I mean, the quad core processing phones that were out there when this came out, this was superior to that.
Yeah.
So it's not the numbers that mean anything. I think it's all about, as we continue to build out the capabilities, there also is another stage in that, and that is learning how to optimize software for hardware. And when you start to do that,
well, one thing this article wasn't about, but it's my own observation, is that you have people that are skipping computers and their phone is becoming their computer. And I would say, just an anecdotal, my wife is a great example of this. She really skipped the whole computer thing, and she does so much on her iPhone. And I've had the same conversation 3 or 4 times in the last 2 months where she'll be doing stuff, and I say to her, it would be a lot easier if you would just open that up on the computer and then try to sign up and stuff. And we had this conversation yesterday, and I thought of this article, and it just dawned on me. Wait a minute, though. This is her computer.
Yeah.
This is her computer. And it doesn't matter that maybe it'd be quicker to do it over there. This is so she is, I don't know how many people she represents, but she represents a lot of people for whom this is their computer.
Yeah, and the time, so there was the time with computers where it was intense, and you really had to put a lot of effort and work into figuring out exactly what's going on and learning how to use that, becoming comfortable with that. A long period of time of that.
Yes.
Smartphones, there was a very short window of time. I mean, it was there. Windows Phone, stuff like that. Like, there were some things, and it took a lot of work to say, okay, what exactly is happening here, and how do we do this? But that was such a small period of time that we jumped that hurdle quick enough to where these aren't overly daunting. I mean, they're still daunting for some. I had a conversation with a lady the other day, just trying to explain, all right, so here's how you could look at a Kindle book. Oh, well, you have to have the app. Well, where do we go to get that again? You go to this place. There's a couple hurdles still to jump, but it's not as intense as here's a terminal. Here's DOS and a command prompt. Be sure how do you execute Windows to get into Windows 3.1? When your computer boots
Well,
into
and
DOS.
for Sherry, she went from feature phone to the iPhone, and so by the time she got the iPhone, it was 4S, and I mean, this was a smooth operating system. It's touch-oriented.
That was a huge hurdle, too.
Yep.
Ah.
And she glommed onto that where she never, ever glommed onto computers.
Yeah. I mean, again, just evidence of this around the world. I mean, when I get to visit Haiti, every kid there can take my phone. They know exactly what to do.
Yeah.
None of them have one. They're just like sitting down, like they can sit down and they can whip out.
Okay, so
Angry
talking
Birds
about
and play
Haiti
it.
next week, Lowell Adams is our guest.
Yeah.
Tell our listeners a little bit about Lowell.
Yeah,
Adams.
so Lowell is community health there on Sangale, on the greater island of Loganov, which is in the Bay of Haiti, and teaches basically how communities within themselves can start to help one another, can do some wise things to keep from getting sick, and basically creating a team inside a community where they're not having to send a team, where it's all they're training inside that to then grassroots build it out. And there's logical reasons for this. On Sangale is a place where that's the only hospital on that island. The other side of the island, very mountainous. It takes about 7 or 8 hours by vehicle to get from one side of the island to the other. If they had a major injury over there, I've heard stories about people, being loaded to go to the hospital, and by they've died before they can get there. So how do you do basic care and treatment for somebody, and building that out inside of the smaller communities? They're very, very interesting. He'll also talk about toilets, which oh yeah,
it'll be a first on our show.
That's right. We're toilet talk.
Heath, we were supposed to have a giveaway this week. We need to push that back 1 week.
Yes.
The app that we
Podium
featured last
Q,
week.
we're giving away. It's an iPad app, so no need to really enter if you don't have an iPad. But we'll give away 3 copies of that.
I'll take the fall on that one.
That's all right.
I wasn't prepared on that. But after the show
or
today,
just
we'll have
letting
it
you
up
know,
and
we'll
running.
get that set up.
Get that set up.
And our 200th episode, Matthew's got some really fun stuff planned for me, and we're not having a guest that day. We're just going to talk about
our greatest moments in the show history.
Yeah. Both of them.
And our 200th show, we have a video where it got a great endorsement, and so that'll be shown to you soon.
You remember Donkey Kong a while back? We talked about Donkey Kong.
We talked about Donkey Kong.
Kong.
And I said I've never ever played it.
And at our 200th episode, you will no longer be able to say that. Yes. Because live on the air, Tony will be defeating Donkey Kong.
It's a hard game.
My virgin experience with Donkey Kong will be public.
You need to watch the movie on Netflix.
I'm not watching anything.
Fistful of Quarters. Or
the guy's trying to break
King of Kong.
King of Kong. Yeah.
That's the subtitle. King of Kong, a fistful of quarters.
Right. Our good friend Steve Stanley will be in the studio that day as well.
So that'll just add to the fun chaos of the day.
We want to get a cake if someone wants to fund that for us. No. All right. Heath, where can our listeners find you on the internet?
Oh, on the internet. Right now, I'm right here. HeathMullican.com. Not a whole lot going on there, but Facebook, Twitter, follow me. I'll follow you.
All right, Teach.
MatthewTG.com, where our motto is, if you can spell it, you are worthy to talk to me and Tony.
Look for me over at Twitter, AKC64. If you want to do further research on anything we discussed today, you can find all the links to the stories we covered at our website, thetechnologyshow.com. If you want to contact us, send your emails to thetechnologyshow@gmail.com, or better yet, why don't you call us at 3049 Theology? You can call us up there, leave a message, and we may even play your comments on the air. As always, thanks for joining us. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Adios.